Another thing I can do in Mudbox is sculpting. So for that I want to be in the sculpt layers and using the sculpt tools. And I can make here a new layer. For that I don't want flat shading or flat lighting because it will be pretty hard to actually see what I'm sculpting. And what you notice is that right now our low resolution mesh is actually not really good enough to create any high resolution sculpting, especially if you want to use, let's say, a kind of detailed stamp. For example, here I'm doing an imprint, and you use something like that, it will actually not even register because the mesh is too low res. And that's really the power of Mudbox. So here you can say mesh and then add a new subdivision level, and that will actually increase the resolution of the mesh without really making your software too much, without slowing it down too much. So you see how each level that we're adding adds a little bit of extra time. So you can probably go comfortably to level 3 or 4. 4 might already be pushing it. It really depends on how high the resolution is of your initial model. But essentially, you want to go to a level where you can really do some detailed sculpting without actually, let's say, putting your model into a state of slowing it down way too much. So here, alright, so here now we are on level 4. Made a new layer, and so I can use that same stamp that I just imported. By the way, this is something you can create your own stamps in Photoshop. So this is a custom stamp. If I just quickly show you in Photoshop, so literally you can go make a new file, and you want it to be a square format. So 2048 by 248 is a good resolution. That's going to be high res enough. And so literally in order to make that stamp, I made a big letter, and I downloaded kind of a custom font, a big G. So here you can see it. It's actually capital G, which for some reason, oh yeah. So here, and just scale that up to the full size of my drawing board, and saved that same file as a PNG. One thing you want to pay attention to, if you want to use this as a stamp, you actually have to make sure that your stamp is inverted, because it works just like in the physical space where your stamp is going to basically be reflected from its original. So here, this is that same image I imported here by clicking the arrow, add stamp, and then importing it from my files. So this is a great process for you to create your own custom stamps. So I'm going to use this one here, and as a first test, if you just open it up, it by default the imprint goes inside, but I want it to go, so I'm just undoing this, I want it to go up, and I do that by pressing Control, and also I don't want this sort of line around it. So here in fall off, I basically just set the transparency to 0 at the very edge, and that way my stamp will actually not leave any trace on the edges. So here I'm pressing Control as I'm doing this, and that actually makes my stamp go up. Now I can use the smooth tool to actually smooth out some of these edges here, because you can sort of still see the edge a little bit. I want it to be stronger. So here you can see how the mesh is really high, quite high res now. So it allows me to kind of smooth over these areas. Even the actual stamp, I can maybe smooth a little bit. So now I use the big brush. But if it gets too smooth, it becomes hard to read. So I can use the amplify brush to kind of make it more contrasty and kind of like make it come out a little bit further. So it can be like a push and pull sometimes between, you know, making something smooth and then making sure it reads strong enough. Another quite useful one is the pinch tool, where you can sort of like deflate certain elements of your drawing. So for example, here I can sort of pinch this area, and I can also use the bulge tool to do the opposite, to kind of like make certain areas of it sort of come out and become fatter. But yeah, this looks pretty good, but it's, you know, obviously it requires a really, really high resolution mesh. So if I don't want to have such a high resolution mesh in Rhino, because it will slow my file down a lot, there's a very useful process where I can extract a displacement map and then use it to render in Rhino without actually creating such a heavy mesh. So for that, here I'm using the UV maps and go into extract texture maps, new operation. And so here I have a different set of options. Displacement map is the one I want, and what it does, here's a little diagram of it. Essentially it takes your high resolution model and creates a sort of map out of it that you can then apply to your low resolution model. So here target model is, you know, the level 0 resolution model, and source model is the one that I can see now on the screen, which is our level 4 model. So here subdivision method works fine. So the image size, you can do 1024. I would start with the lowest one, but then, you know, you might need to go up in resolution if this is too low or doesn't give you enough detail. And so you want it to be a texture file, and then you just set a file name here. So here you want to call it displacement map, and then it will create a PNG, and you just hit extract. It takes a few seconds, and then it will have created a displacement app for you, which you can use for rendering.